All right, what is going on, y'all? I've been having some technical difficulties. My bad if y'all saw like 2 live streams pop up and then immediately go away. I don't know what's going on with my computer or my software right now. So if we get disconnected on this stream again, then I might have to just come back on a different week or next week and figure out what's going on. But thank you guys for tuning in to week 14 of the Career Progression Bootcamp. If you guys are into tech, entrepreneurship, coding, startups, anything like that, make sure you guys like, share, and subscribe. That's all we talk about here on this channel. And so right now here with me is La, our weekly guest. She's a software developer, and we both kind of just share what we work on throughout the week. Outside of our jobs is how we learn new things and how we just kind of stay competitive in the market. So if you guys are trying to like transition into a software development job or like QA or I don't know. Am I still live right now? By the uploader? I don't know. Am I still live? What is happening? Okay, looks like I am still live. Alright, I'm sorry, y'all. My software is kind of just going nuts right now. I don't know if there's like a bandwidth problem or whatever. So anyway, yeah. Let's just go ahead and get into it, guys. This is La right here coming back in. Yo, can you hear me?
I'm back. Yep.
Okay, cool. So yeah, guys, before we have any more technical difficulties, real quick, I'm gonna go ahead and just share my screen and we'll just get right to it. So I want to show. Okay, cool. And I want to show this. Alright, so hopefully this works. This is where everything has been crashing the last couple times that I tried this when I shared my screen. So we'll see if everything goes smoothly. But this week I wanted to talk about some React libraries that I was working with. And I guess that for anybody who's not a little kind of like intermediate in JavaScript, you might not have used libraries and things like that yet, or have been exposed to them, or if you have, you might not know what they are, how they work, why they are there, why they're important. So I'm gonna discuss some React libraries that I used this week for my startup as I was kind of coding out some new features, and then La's gonna touch on React Native and some of the stuff that she has been doing with that. So I thought it was just a good overlap to kind of talk about kind of JavaScript discussion. So first, we're going to talk about libraries in general. So what is a JavaScript library? So this definition I literally just grabbed off Khan Academy because it kept it simple. A library is a JavaScript file or files that contain a bunch of functions, and those functions accomplish some useful tasks for your web page. So essentially, these libraries are exported as modules, and you can use them. They're basically like reusable code that other people have written to solve problems that we commonly run into as developers, whether you're JavaScript, whatever. A lot of languages have something similar. They might not be called necessarily a library, but that is what a JavaScript library specifically is referring to. It's JavaScript functions or code that other people have written to help us solve problems easily, so that we don't have to keep writing the same code over and over and over to solve the same types of problems. So this is just a list, like literally not even a fraction of all the different JavaScript libraries that exist. There's a ton of them. I think that's kind of like one of the pros and cons that a lot of people either like or hate about JavaScript, is that there's a million ways to do a lot of things or everything. There's always different types of libraries and micro packages and like all these things that can, very small libraries that don't add a ton of like weight to your project, but they can give you a lot of cool functionality or just make your life easier when you're, trying to implement a certain feature, or even like CSS animations. There's libraries for that. So there's a library for pretty much everything in JavaScript, and I think that while that's great, and La can talk about this at the end, but she's a big proponent of keeping everything pure, or kind of like doing everything yourself, or everything having one responsibility, and then you writing all your own functionality and things yourself. And if you don't know how to do it, with just vanilla JavaScript, then you don't use a library or something that makes it easier for you. And so I know that helped me out a lot. It's a great point, because that's kind of why I wanted to talk about libraries this week. Because if you know that libraries exist, if you're getting into programming, coming out of bootcamp, or you're learning on your own and you're going through tutorials and stuff like that, I think it's very easy to get into the mindset of just finding a package or a library that solves a problem for you, or that makes something really easy, and then never really understanding that code is written by somebody else and it's open source. They're given out for other developers to use, but again, somebody has to maintain that. You don't know how they wrote it. You don't know the philosophy behind what they were writing, or you don't know really much about it if you don't dig into it, or at least understand what a library is and the pitfalls of it and things like that. So I think that's one of the cons sometimes, is that even though there's a lot of things in JavaScript that are there to help you, like libraries, sometimes it can be overkill. And you'll see as we're about to talk about some of the libraries going forward. So these are the two that I was working with this week. One is called Styled Components. It's a CSS library for React. And then the other one is React Beautiful DMD, which stands for drag and drop. And it is for implementing drag and drop in React projects and your components really simply, or a lot more simply than if we had to implement it ourselves. So I thought these were two good examples, because as you guys have known, if you go back and look at some of the videos on this channel, I am very new to React. I've really just started getting into React seriously in 2020. So I'm still discovering a lot of, things about React that I didn't know. And some of the stuff that React has for me is like, because I'm not a super experienced JavaScript developer, I'm still getting my chops kind of with JavaScript. So for some of the things that, like how React works, it's a little weird to me. It's a little quirky. CSS was always one of those things, and then drag and drop is just something that I've never implemented in vanilla JavaScript period at all. So I know that it's possible. Obviously, a lot of things are possible with JavaScript, but I had never actually taken the time to try to implement a vanilla JavaScript drag and drop feature. So for one thing, I know enough about JavaScript to know that implementing vanilla JavaScript drag and drop is probably going to be a lot more work than a library. And then on top of that, React has its own rules with lifecycle components and how things work with the DOM. And so on top of just knowing how to implement drag and drop in vanilla JavaScript, you also have to know how to make that work inside of a React ecosystem. And for me, I mean, it's great. It would be great to learn that and to do all those things. But for the purpose of my startup in time and building my projects, I did my research and I picked what I found like the best supported drag and drop library. And the documentation for the React Beautiful DMD library is how I found style components, so they kind of went hand in hand. So yeah, I just want to kind of touch on those a little bit. So the style components one, like I said, is a CSS library, so it simplifies writing CSS with React, and it utilizes something called tag template literals, which helps you keep the CSS organized, so you can keep all your CSS inside the same component file as opposed to breaking it out into a separate CSS file, which I'm not against that personally. I don't mind having CSS files separately, because at least it makes everything kind of easy to kind of pin down and track. But again, like with now using this library, I'm finding that it's also really cool to be able to keep everything inside the same component. Is in terms of like styling and everything. And I like not having to kind of play around with some of the quirky React syntax to get my CSS to work properly how I expect it with React. So as you guys are going to see in some of the upcoming slides, there's a lot of kind of like different ways. Like I said, there's different ways to do everything in JavaScript. So there's a few different ways we can play around and customize our CSS in our React components. But again, it's not as natural if you're coming from like a straight up HTML, CSS, JavaScript background. It's not as natural feeling to a non like super like React person. So this library to me was really cool because it helped me really be able to just write the CSS that I'm used to writing, and then it still works basically as expected with React. So for me, it improved the development experience. And again, these are all really just my main points of why I went with this one. But you'll see that this is not the only CSS library that you could use. You've got tons of options. Okay, so let's look at the original couple ways that we could work with CSS in React without using this library or a library at all. Our first option is going to be Inline Styles. So you guys can see here with this style tag right here, the style attribute, and inside it has this object, and inside this object you can put your CSS properties. So that's one way of doing it. Now again, this could get really bloated if you're like writing all this inline. And it could also get a little bit confusing if you've got a ton of JavaScripts and everything mixed in with your HTML, mixed in with your CSS, like all just right there. These JavaScript files can get pretty big depending on what you're doing. And, even though this is convenient probably in this case to write it inline because it's just a simple, color change. But, if you're doing some intense styling or, like I said, animations or anything like that, this is not going to be ideal, especially for readability and maintainability. So then you've got CSS classes like this. So in React, you have to use class name on your HTML elements to be able to, give it classes, CSS classes. So you could do that in this way. This way is not bad at all. Probably the more ideal way of doing it. Again, I haven't played around with this a ton, but this is pretty much what you'll see out of the box when you use like Create React App or anything like that. You'll see this type of styling being done out of the box. So yeah, you can play around with this, and let's see. This is the other style as well too. So you're still using the style attribute here, but you're using it in a different way. You're actually writing so kind of like what we're going to be doing with the style components, except you're doing all that stuff inside of a actual variable. You're putting your actual CSS styles into a JavaScript variable, and then you're passing that into your HTML element as CSS styles. So again, more similar to probably what you're familiar with coming from just regular, CSS HTML. But again, still takes a little getting used to. It's still a little bit odd, unnatural, at least for me in the development process right now. So this is basically just showing you guys what we would have to do without using something like style components. Just showing you like the problem that it kind of solves. So instead, what I'm able to do by using style components is literally just so in the same way as you just saw that can this variable div style right here that has the styles inside of it, and we have to pass that over. We can do something similar by declaring a variable here and just giving it like whatever type of HTML element we want. In this case, it's a div. Style just comes from the component syntax or the API syntax, or I'm sorry, the library syntax, and then a div is just the HTML element that we want. And then in here I can just write my CSS literally exactly like I would in a CSS file. So and then this is the output down here. It's this outer box, this outermost the outermost surrounding box. I'll move this up just a bit, but as you guys can see, that the biggest box on the outside is what that does. Whoops. Cool. So this is essentially, the difference between, writing CSS like this and like this and like this in JavaScript or React, and being able to use a library like style components to write it like this. So it's all personal preference. Like I said, these are some of the alternative library names that would basically help you accomplish something similar. These are all kind of like CSS or style component related libraries that are out there for React. So again, like you have options. Like I said, it's not like there's one size fits all. Some libraries are more popular than others, and some are more well supported than others. Some have been downloaded or installed and used more than others. So there's always a personal reason why people pick and choose libraries, one over the other. So don't feel like you have to use whatever the whole world is going with. If there's, for whatever reason, maybe your project has a specific need or something like that, remember that all these tools exist specifically for a certain reason, even though they all do the same thing. And you can, mix and match, pick and choose whatever works best for you and your project. Second one, we won't spend a ton of time on it because I'm still actually working on it with my project, but I just wanted to just touch on what I did get to experience for myself this week. So React Beautiful DMD simplifies the state and reordering management of like dragging components around on your screen. It also enables reordering things with the arrow keys. You can easily toggle it on and off if you want that to be allowed or not, but I thought that was really cool because if not, you'd have to write that code yourself, which would, again, leads to the next point, reduces the code bloat, so you won't just have a whole bunch of drag and drop logic written in vanilla JavaScript. Basically, you can keep everything separated out into a couple different components. And then most of the heavy lifting, all that vanilla JavaScript and everything is, written somewhere else and handled for you by Beautiful DMD. So it's highly customizable. It has good resource support. So specifically, you guys will see on the next slide, there's like an entire site dedicated to teaching you how to use Beautiful DMD. And I really appreciate that as a developer, or somebody who's implementing this library, because the creator thought enough of the people like us who are trying to share this with other people and use it ourselves. Sometimes it's hard to find documentation that really explains things well or that can answer specific questions. So to have such good documentation and, like I said, a basically video library walking you through everything from installing to using it inside your project and customizing it, I think it's really cool, and I think that's what makes React Beautiful DMD stand out from some of the other drag and drop like libraries for React, because the creator really went out of his way to make it an easy experience for people to use, so they could just focus on creating the type of app that they want and not so much stressing over how to make the drag and drop functionality work. And so it gives you a really pleasant user experience. And so this is what I mean by really well documented. If you guys want to go over to Egghead IO, this is where the creator basically shared a video library of how to use Beautiful DMD. And yeah, I think that's the reason why I'm not going to go super in depth on how to use it here, because I feel like it wouldn't make sense for me to do it when the creator himself has a whole platform. But I just wanted to put that out here to kind of add on to the discussion about libraries and just kind of give you a different library as an example, but also because is like one of the only libraries that I know of that has a whole video documentation step by step how to use it by the creator himself. So that's another good thing too, because he can actually explain what his thought process was when he created Beautiful DMD. And that will help you understand a lot of the code without you having to go dig through it yourself and like digging through the node modules and find the library and digging through the files and making sense of the comments and what they're trying to say. Like, he literally walks you through his thought process, why things are the way they are, why you get certain errors. So it's extremely well documented. I would highly recommend it if you're a React developer or learning React and trying to implement something like drag and drop. And yeah, here are some of the alternatives to that too. So you've got Beautiful DMD, which has 15K stars, probably way more than that now on GitHub. And again, I think that it's because of the developer experience and the fact that it's well supported. Like I said, the creator made a whole site for people. So again, it obviously works, right? In terms of marketing, it's one of the biggest reasons why I'm recommended out to you guys. There's another one, React DMD, and also React Grid Layout, and they all have their pros and cons, advantages, or whatever. Again, there's no right and wrong answer. These are all three different React libraries that basically help you accomplish the same goal or solve the same problem. So in summary, guys, to wrap it up, libraries are reusable code that gives our application additional functionality. There are many ways to implement CSS and React, either through inline styles, the style attribute, or classes. And again, this is still excluding using multiple different types of libraries and things like that. Style components is an efficient and simple CSS library for React. It utilizes the tagged literals, which is those backticks that you saw in some of the code examples, to write standard CSS code in React applications. So it makes it way simpler and more natural, in my opinion, to people who haven't come from a JavaScript library background, Angular, Vue, React, things like that. And React Beautiful DMD is one of the 3 powerful React libraries to implement drag and drop functionality into applications. So that is all I've got for this week. So La, if you got any feedback or anything, while I slide you over real quick. You might be on mute, La. I can't hear you.
Oh no, I said that was really good. I said you definitely set me up, get me started. I said you might want to respond to the chat. You have a question for you, so maybe you want to start taking some of those questions while I get started.
Oh, okay, that's perfect. Thank you for telling me that too, because it's so hard. Like I got a couple screens up. I'm trying to like keep everything moving and not have everybody waiting. But yeah, you're right. I haven't been checking the chats. So let me see really quick. Is D&D for restricted to you? Okay, so we got, all right, cool. So I will respond to this. So Clark, I see you, my man. I'm gonna go ahead and let La kick it off, and then we'll take a break in somewhere while she's talking. We'll take a break, and then I will be sure to answer this. I'm gonna just read your question on another screen really quick while she gets started. So La, I'm gonna go ahead and present you. Okay, cool. So Clark, great question. So Clark said, does React D&D, Beautiful DMD feel restrictive to you, or is it extensive enough to allow some semblance of design freedom? So the way that I'm using it, I personally think so far it's very extensible. So like those grids that you saw on the screenshot for each of those names, that is just like, a regular div that's getting styled or whatever with some CSS. But and so basically it looks very plain and very ordinary right now, because that is literally kind of just out of the box, like the drag and drop functionality inside of a div. I haven't done any styling to that div. Like I haven't done anything to it yet. So essentially, I think that it is super extensive, because I've been able to adjust the div and do whatever, kind of no different than I would have done if I wasn't using D&D. I can still style things and do everything pretty much the same. So I'll be sure to touch on that once I actually put the CSS in and everything, and be sure to probably make a video on that. That's a really good question, Von. But yeah, I think it is very extensible. It hasn't given me a hard time at all. And then by him having, like I said, the site dedicated to getting everything set up, I was able to get it implemented. Like going from never using D&D to implement it in my project probably took like a few hours. I mean, granted, like I had to do some troubleshooting, but I think that probably would have took a lot longer. Just because it's in React, and I'm very new to React, so I'm not super familiar with the reordering and state management process sometimes about how things are working. So to have a video explainer of how he built the library and how it helps you with those things, it really helped get it off the ground quickly. And so I think it is. I think it's a good one. I haven't tried the other ones though, in all fairness. D&D and the grids one. I haven't tried those two. Okay, so La, whenever you're ready, we're good to go.
All right. So today, I guess we can get started. So today, we'll talk a little bit about React Native. I've been working on that for a while, so just want to sort of just provide some foundation to the topic. Probably we'll go over it again at some point later on in a more advanced manner. So I want to give it just a little foundation to it at this point. So I'll talk today about what React Native actually is, what are some alternatives, how to use it, some sample code, and pretty much just a conclusion.
Cool. It might take a sec. I just flipped you though.
Oh, yeah, maybe I can flip myself off. Wait. All right. So React Native. I know I've got React Admin. We're a little bit far behind.
Okay.
All right.
Did it flip? Yeah. Okay.
Yep. So React Native. So pretty much what is it? React Native is pretty much it allows you to create mobile apps. And why React Native is important is that typically, if you didn't have React Native, you would have to create a mobile app using native code. And when I say native code, each type of mobile app, Android or iOS, they both have their own native code. So native code for Android is Java or Kotlin, and native code for iOS is Swift or C#. So with that being said, if you wanted to build an app and you think about your user base, even though you have majority of the world, I would say, use iOS, there's still a fractional percentage of the population that uses Android. And if you are building for a business purpose, it could get very costly if you have to find a developer who needs to be able to build the app in two ways, who needs to be able to build the app for iOS, who needs to build the app for the Android. So React Native comes into play because it gives you the opportunity to sort of code once for both types. What do I mean by that? I mean that you can write React Native code, and that code will work on both your Android and your iOS device. So we go to the next screen.
Mm-hmm.
It's also written in JavaScript, so it's a JavaScript framework. Yeah, I probably should tell you to before I'm done.
Yeah. Just give me a heads up. I'll flip it a little earlier.
Yeah, no worries. So I guess while we're flipping, I could just continue to talk a little. Mm-hmm. Well, we're going to the next slide. We'll talk about a little bit about what are your other options. If you didn't want to use React Native, what other options could you have and still be able to provide the same type of hybrid solution where you have the option to write code in one type of language and use that code for both iOS and Android. And also you do have an option, because React Native does give you an option to manipulate the native code as well. So, you can flip there. But the three options there would be Flutter, Xamarin, and Ionic. And they both are sort of similar to React Native, where they give you the option to code once and use it for both type of devices. You flip again.
Yeah, I flipped. Yeah, it's gonna take a sec. Yeah.
So how to use? So React Native comes with two ways to use. I think they just created a third way, similar to your create React app, like create native app, something like that. But the two main ways of using React Native is using Expo or using native. And Expo is sort of like it's sort of like an IE, but I would say a little bit more than an IE. I would call it a little bit more like maybe a code pen type of thing, so to speak, where it does everything for you. It makes it easier for you to publish your app to to the App Store or to Google Play. It also makes it easy for you to push your app to production, and it also allows you. It gives you a barcode, so you can be able to pass your app over to your friends or whoever you would like to pass your app to a lot easier. However, of course, when apps come with that type of sort of, I'm going to say freedom, when it comes with that type of ease, there's always some type of limitations or restrictions that you're not able to do. So it doesn't give you as much limitations to change the code or to manipulate development environment. So pretty much Expo probably would be something you would use if you were just building apps for, just to, I don't know, for the sake of it, for your personal. But if you were building an app that you intended that a group of developers or a team would use, you probably wouldn't use Expo. You probably use the native way. The native way is typically just going with the command line, and it gives you more access to manipulating the actual native code and the JavaScript code for your device. I'm sorry, you switch. I probably should have told you a minute ago. Yeah.
Oh, you see it already?
No, you switched though.
Wait, I switched?
So, no, you can switch. You can.
Oh, got you. Okay, got you. Yeah. Might take a second.
Yeah. So, getting started with React Native is also pretty complicated because it requires you to you have to sort of connect a lot of devices. Either way, whether you use the React Native CLI or you use the React Native Expo, both ways still require you to set up a lot of different things. You have to install the package, of course. Then you have to install Android Studio and Xcode. I say because if you're developing a mobile device for both Android and Xcode, then you have to install both. They're two different devices. Two different packages, two different softwares. So you have to install both of them. And Xcode is very heavy. In Xcode, you have to have a Mac to be able to use Xcode. But Android Studio, you can use Android Studio on a Mac. You also have to install this Watchman device. It sort of helps, sort of a way to watch your code for any changes to update it automatically. You have to update in variables, install your emulator, install Node, and then install your React Native CLI. You can switch it. But pretty much just to get started with this, it doesn't seem like a lot when I go through it, but it's a lot of different devices talking to each other. So, in order to typically have a React Native device, I usually have at least 4 or 5 different windows open of different packages. So I guess to sort of wrap it up, because again, it's just an introduction to show you what it is. React Native ultimately is very similar to React. So if you know React, then React Native won't be too difficult for you. And it's interesting that Darian talked a minute ago about style components because React Natives, the way they use or they code their CSS is very similar to like a style component. So it makes it easy in that regard to code your CSS. But other things are a little bit more difficult. You can switch. I.e., one of the things that make React Native a little bit more, I guess, difficult, not difficult, but I just think is different in regards to React, is that React's a framework. React Native is like an API. So what I mean by that is, like I said, that React Native, it sort of sits on top of your your native code. So I don't know if you guys watched or Darren, you remember we talked a lot about scripting languages, how scripting languages sit on top of the regular native language, so that it's pretty much talking to the native language, and the native language compiles and does all the other stuff. This is sort of similar to the same thing. So when you're writing your React Native, you don't write components like div or things like that. You have to write things like view or style sheet, or and they come right out the API. So you actually have to go onto the React Native API, and you're only allowed to use the components that come with that API. You're not allowed to customize or create your own components. Those are the components that are offered to you. And the value of those components are that those components talk directly to your native code. So whether you write native code or the native code that comes with React Native, that's the significance of those libraries. And you pretty much have to use all the libraries that are given to you. One thing that makes React Native a little bit difficult is that it's not a lot of, I don't know, the community doesn't seem, not a lot of help out there. So when you get sort of stuck with things, there's not a lot of research, or people haven't done a lot of the work yet. So you're pretty much just figuring things out as you go along. But in any event, this is the sample code. Like I said, it looks very similar to like React. This would be a DOM component or a function component, or and you see there is your typical React at the top. You have UC because this is using the higher order component. Like I said, React Native is an API, so line 3 is the API, and you're importing the actual packages. The other components are like anything else, in React. If you're going to build a component, you want to use that component inside another component, you need to import it. So that's the same thing you see there. Again, you have your high-order component there. You have your function. But other than that, for the most part, you can see you can switch it down. It looks for the most part more so just like React for the most part. At this point, there's not too many things that are different than how you would use React at this point. You switch it?
Yeah, yep.
Alright. So, in the final part of the code, will highlight a little bit of the differences that I speak about when I say that React Native does have some differences than React. And if you see right there, the return statement, this is where I talk about using the API view. That's sort of like your div. So that's sort of like, if you want to use any kind of a div or container type, view is what you use. And that, again, is the API that comes right out of your React Native package, API. So you have to, look up that and see what other methods or other options, properties that come with that. Goal input is, of course, a component that's very similar to React, but flat list, again, is another that come with it. You can see right there. And at the end of it, there are your styles component, sort of similar to your, like I say, style component, where you create a styles object, and inside your styles object, you can create the different type of CSS you want. And then, of course, if you see at the top, you sort of just put styles. Do I have it up here, sure?
Yep.
At the view, you see it. Yep. View, you see style equals styles.screen. So that's pretty much how you manage that. And that's pretty much just the overview of React Native. Like I said, it's not too. I think I don't know if it's another.
Let's see. Nope.
React Native, like I said before, it's very similar to React. There are some slight differences, and it does. Not as much support, so a lot of it is pretty much trial and error and trying to figure out how things work. There are options or ways that you can use and manipulate the native code if you choose. But there's also you can build some nice apps with just using the regular API that's offered that comes with React Native itself. Again, this is a basic foundation. We didn't talk anything about navigation or routing or anything like that. That is another component to this, but again, this is just an overview of what React Native is and how you can get yourself started if you choose. Any questions, Darian?
Yeah, so you kind of answered one of them already. It was going to be basically like how much, so you coming from a React background and also having built a project in Vue.js as well, just basically you're familiar with JavaScript libraries already. So what would you say, the biggest learning curve moving into React Native for the first time? For somebody coming from a, Angular, Vue, React background?
Well, I feel like, all these languages are like languages, like regular languages that how people communicate. And I feel like they all have their own sort of, little rhythm to them. And, you can learn the language and learn all the syntax and, understand how to speak it. But, it takes you a while to get the rhythm to talk like everyone else. So I just think that's pretty much it. Just trying to find a rhythm of how does it really work? What does this error mean? When I get this error, why is it telling me this? So pretty much just getting a rhythm of it. What can I use? Why can't I use that? Why won't this work? So that's pretty much where I'm at with it.
Did you run into any new or odd errors because you're now moving to mobile, coming from web development?
Yeah, there's a lot of weird errors. One thing I'm used to in mobile, I'm used to with web development, being able to use my Google console to open it up the screen and to see what's going on and find out what the CSS was happening there. You don't have that option with React Native.
Really?
You have to use the simulator, and the simulator doesn't really give you as much insight into what's going on into the actual CSS or the front end of the framework the way you actually get from the Google Chrome extension. So I think that's pretty much a little quirky, I would say, or a little bit, it makes it a little difficult or challenging to sort of figure out, other ways to understand what's happening to the app. Sometimes the error and the errors, you do have a debugger and you do have your console, but sometimes the error messages are different in all three. So you don't really quite know what the error is. And then the stack trace, So it's very different. It's very different. Very different when you're trying to figure out how to debug it. So that makes it, to me, that's the most challenging part. Just trying to figure out why this didn't work the way you would, that you anticipated it to work.
Huh. That's really interesting. No, I think that was good. I haven't developed in React Native at all yet. Barely even seen React Native code. So that was a good first introduction. Especially seeing your code examples, because it looks like if I didn't know, I would think that was React. You know what I mean? And it's just you're using certain things I haven't seen in React before. They look very similar, but yeah, that was a great first introduction. So yeah, cool guys. Well, this is week 14. Again, we try to do this as often as we can on the weekends. It's usually on Sundays now because that's what works best for myself and La with our work schedule at the moment. So catch us here. Next weekend we try to stay on top of it. Let us know if you guys want to see something in particular. We'll try to make content around that or answer questions. So I thank you guys for taking the time out to be here with us. Hope this was helpful for y'all. Be sure to like, share, subscribe. Leave a thumbs up if you guys enjoyed this or learned anything from it. And we'll catch you guys next week. All right. Peace. All right, La. Catch you. Peace.